Welcome to Small Ship Cruise Talk, a show where we share insider tips and first-hand experiences about this outstanding, yet lesser-known form of travel. We are passionate about sharing our knowledge about river cruises, expedition, yacht, and barge cruises, so you are informed when it comes to choosing your own vacation experiences. We're your co-hosts, Dan and Mikkel, and we are your cruise experts and the co-founders of Sometimes Sailing, a website that focuses on small ship cruising. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Small Ship Cruise Talk. Last episode we were tiptoeing through the tulips, and this episode we are going to visit Alaska. We will be recounting our journey with Alaskan Dream Cruises.
Our sojourn inside Alaska's Inside Passage. So in the next few episodes, we're going to have a bit of a Best of Alaska series, and we are going to take you aboard our Alaskan Dream Cruises adventure. We're going to tell you the top things to do in Sitka. We're going to tell you what to do in Ketchikan, and also big cruises versus small ship cruises in the last frontier or the 49th state. Alaska's got a lot of nicknames. I also want to mention we're doing away with episode numbers, so we're not going to call them 8, 9, 10, etc., because you don't have to listen to our episodes sequentially necessarily. So that's great for you and great for anybody just tuning in for the first time. We welcome everybody. We are so excited and grateful you're here. And the only time we recommend listening to things sequentially is if it's a 2-part series, let's say. So if it's labeled part 1 or 2, that's how we recommend listening. But the Best of Alaska, all these can stand on their own, so just tune in and listen to whatever information you are going to get a lot of helpful planning tips and advice from.
In this episode, we'll be sharing our experiences with Alaskan Dream Cruises. Now, this cruise that we took was through the Inside Passage. Now, if you're curious about small ship cruising in Alaska, this is definitely the episode you want to listen to. It's going to give you that insider's perspective that you need to make the right choice for your Alaskan cruise.
You'll discover what makes this native-owned, family-operated cruise line unique and why their ships can access places that big cruise lines cannot reach. And we'll cover everything from your cabin options and starting prices to what to expect from daily onboard life and some packing essentials for a cruise in Alaska, not just going to Alaska, but a cruise if you're going to be on the water. And also the incredible wildlife encounters you can expect and maybe a little bit of what we saw. And by the end of this, you are going to understand why a small ship cruise such as Alaskan Dream Cruises offers a really different, and we believe better, of course, the name of this podcast is Small Ship Cruise Talk, better way to experience the real Alaska.
Let's jump in with what makes Alaskan Dream Cruises special. For starters, it's the only Alaskan native-owned and operated cruise line out there.
Yeah, it's the only native-owned, as Dan said. The owners are Bob and Betty Allen, and Betty is a Tlingit person, and that is spelled Tlingit. It is pronounced with a K, so not to be confused if you ever see it written like you will in the transcript here. And also, we want to acknowledge that the area was for centuries occupied by Native people. This is really important to us to support the Native community whenever we can, in whatever ways we can, big or small, everything helps. So going back, family history started by Bob and Betty Allen and their 5 children. It is still a family-operated business, even though Alaskan Dream Cruises has a great team. And it began as Allen Marine Tours in the 1970s, and they still exist today. We actually took a tour with them in Ketchikan, and we're going to talk about that in the future. And they operate over 30 vessels and employ more than 300 Alaskans. So when you sail with Alaskan Dream Cruises, you are supporting a U.S.-made product. Their ships are flagged U.S. because they're made in the U.S. and they're staffed by U.S. crew, but also Alaskans. And that's really important. So what started as day tours and day operations progressed into overnight cruise adventures. And they go to areas, like we said before, that big ships just can't reach. And little preview, one of those major locations is one of the bucket list parks that people go to Alaska for, and that is misty fjords. Another joy of Alaskan Dream Cruises is that because they are U.S. flagged, they don't have to make an international port of call stop, so you can just stay in Alaska the entire time.
So as we get into this, we really want you to understand what to expect. The cruise experience is very authentic to Alaska. You're going to really feel like you are part of the communities that they visit, and you'll get a true insider's view of what Alaska is like to live there and to work there and to be part of the community.
And to add to that, the reason is because many of these people, the crew on the ship, are staying in Alaska in the off season. They've chosen to live in Alaska, and they have all the contacts and connections to speak to the native people that actually end up giving you a lot of the tours when you are in these ports. So that's why it's an insider's view, whereas if you go on another trip, you might not necessarily get that. You know, it depends what the trip is. But as far as cruises, for all those reasons we just stated, that's why it's extra unique. Also, in terms of what to expect, this is not a luxury cruise or gourmet culinary experience. So if you are interested in Alaskan Dream Cruises, what you are going to get is an incredible, true Alaska vacation. And not to triple repeat ourselves, but it is because of everything we just said, and because you are really going to the heart of small cities, and that's where the true Alaska can be felt, when it's not overrun with tourists and you don't feel like you're one of thousands. Maybe you're one of a couple hundred people in the village. And we're going to tell you the villages that our Inside Passage cruise went to in a little bit, so keep listening. Overall, the cruise season is May through September. You might get some outliers if you are going on a big ship and you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, that's not true. We went in October. It's very uncommon to go in October or April because April's a little too early and October's a little late. But May through September is when Alaskan Dream Cruises sails. And just because it's summer, we do want to point out that you might have high temperatures, usually in the 60s. There are some outliers a little warmer than that, but generally speaking, in the summer, you can expect that. Also expect it to be very cold on the water. I can recall hats and gloves many times when we were standing out on the deck, right, trying to spot like bald eagles and such and other wildlife. And it's a rainforest climate in a lot of these places, which surprises people about Alaska, but it is a rainforest in many of these areas. So with that comes humidity and rain. Let's talk about our ship, the Baranof Dream.
The Baranof Dream is one of 5 ships in the fleet for the Alaskan Dream Cruises. She is 143 feet long with the capacity for 49 passengers, and there's 25 staterooms.
There are various types of cabins, and the sizes obviously correlate to the different type, but we were in a 110 square foot deluxe room. On the Baranof Dream, there's only 3 of these, but it was well worth it because of 2 reasons. Number one, it's 110 square feet, as I just mentioned, but that is versus some of the cabins, and this is a fair majority of cabins on the main deck, are 105 square feet. And you might be thinking, that's just 5 square feet difference. It really, really makes a difference in these rooms and how they are oriented. We have a link in the show notes to a post on our website about this with photos, and you'll be able to visually see the difference in the cabin type. And we were on deck 3, so it does mean climbing another set of stairs. However, this is the bridge deck, so it's really cool to go on the bridge. And that extra space was just so needed when we were in the room. And I would say it really varies how much you're in the room during this cruise. And Dan, let me know if you agree or not, because there were some days that I was like, oh, we like really weren't in the room at all. We were recording, we were just hanging out on the ship. But then there were some times that like it was so cold on the deck that all I wanted to do was lay down, because like you're really doing a very busy schedule. So if you're in the port and then go back on the ship for meals, and then it's all fantastic and it's a vacation, and you know, you choose the vacation, so know what you're getting into. But there were times that I just wanted to snooze for 10 minutes. So I don't know. How did you feel about like being in the room versus not being in the room, and how important the cabin was during this particular cruise?
For me, the cabin was a place to recharge because it's a small vessel. and you are spending a lot of time with your fellow travelers. So sometimes I just needed to kind of get away and recharge a little bit. So I thought the room was great for that, but I do agree it was a bit on the small side, and also the ceilings are, 6.5 feet tall. So for me, I was pretty close to scratching my head on the ceiling in all the rooms.
Dan's 6'2" and I'm 5'1", so I don't have that issue, but we always notice, and by we, I mean Dan, if a bed is really short or if a ceiling is really short. I guess that depends if you're standing up or laying down for the bed versus the ceiling, or a shower is, also short in the height of the bathroom. So that is significant. I mean, we've encountered people that are 6'8" or a little bit taller. So that is a consideration for you on some of these ships. If you're considering Baranof Dream for the Inside Passage, or you are looking into another ship with them, we haven't been on any of their other ships, but you might want to call and just ask them how tall the ceilings are and explain that somebody in your party is tall. If you're short, you're not going to have a problem. But on that topic of mobility, there are a lot of stairs on the ship, and they do not have, I would say, wheelchair accessible hallways. Even if you are in a wheelchair and you need an accessible ship, this is probably not the cruise for you. Also, I would say if you have a walker or a cane, you definitely want to reconsider going on this ship. And that's just to be realistic and set expectations, not to exclude anybody, but rather be inclusive of all kinds of travel. And we want to be as informative as possible. Another thing about this ship is the common areas. Dan, when you were talking about going to the room to retreat and recharge, I like how you phrase that, that's really true. I'm an extroverted introvert and you're an introvert. So I would say that's a really good point. And I think you called out why I really appreciated the room without me even realizing it until you said that.
It truly is your place and your little area, but also just to get in out of the elements a lot of the times. It was chilly up on deck. So if we were on wildlife duty, watching for eagles or whales or whatever, then you just needed a place to just duck into and get out of the wind and warm up for a little bit, and then jump back out on deck.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the other thing was that the two main common areas are the lounge and the restaurant. You couldn't always sit in the restaurant because they were preparing for the next meal. And the lounge was great, but if you needed a change of scenery, or like Dan said, you just needed a break from the other 47, because it's a 49 passenger capacity, as Dan said, you just needed a break from all your other new friends. It was nice to retreat to the room.
So speaking about the lounge, one thing to keep in mind is there is no Wi-Fi on board. So prepare yourself, bring a book, and even cell service was a little sketchy. I think we only got it in 1 or 2 ports, if that many. Be prepared to be disconnected for a little while.
Disconnected, 100%. And this is really important because today so many cruises allow you to work remotely or check in with work. And I remember sitting at one of the state parks, because they have like a little ranger station. Right. It might even be a national park. And everybody was trying to get online because we were trying to do some work and send some emails. And when Dan says there's no Wi-Fi on board, he doesn't mean that it's not included. He means it doesn't exist. So there's no cellular at sea. There's no Starlink. There's no Wi-Fi on board. Any other brand, nothing. And that could be great if you truly are looking to unplug. I mean, it's like White Lotus Season 3 that they put all their cell phones in a bag because one of the joys of being in Thailand at the Four Seasons was disconnecting. So a la White Lotus Season 3, it's not by choice. You can't be connected because there's no cell service for the most part, and there's no Wi-Fi.
So one other thing to keep in mind, and this is near and dear to my heart, is seasickness. The Inside Passage isn't that rocky compared to other areas because the passage is between islands, which protects it. We've included a link to motion sickness remedies in the show description, but depending on how severe your motion sickness is, you may or may not need it. You probably won't need it for this particular cruise.
Do you remember needing it?
I did not, but I know Matt and Sonia did.
Oh, yeah. 2 of our friends that we met on this sailing introduced us to relief bands because they had never been on a cruise prior to that. And one of their concerns was the motion of the ocean. But luckily from the relief band, which is linked in our show notes, they were fine, and it really changed their lives in being able to cruise. And they've been on cruises since, and we have also been on cruises since, many a cruise, with the relief van. So I would say, as you say, Dan, it's better to have and not need than find yourself up a creek without a paddle. Is that a good water analogy or pun for this? All right.
One other important key aspect of this that people are often curious about is, how much is this going to cost? When we cruised, the price was starting at $5,995 per person for standard accommodations. Now, the deluxe rooms, like what we had, were starting at $8,495 per person.
And there are 2 stateroom categories in between that at varying rates. One is about $1,000 per person more, and then jump up from that is about $800 per person more, because I think it pretty much goes like almost based off of the square footage. There's only 2 cabins that are bigger than what we had that are a little more money. But if you can swing a deluxe room, go for it, because that extra square footage really matters. And also with that is the alcohol policy. So included with the deluxe bookings, you get alcohol included, and that includes anything at the bar outside of lunch and dinner. Otherwise, it just includes 1 glass of wine or beer with dinner. So all cruise fares include just 1 glass of wine or beer with dinner. And the bar prices aren't bad at all. A cocktail is $10.50, for example. A beer is $7.50, for example. So it's really not that bad to pay a la carte, but we do want to bring that up because river cruising, for example, includes wine and beer with lunch and dinner. We have an episode where we talk about the top things to know about river cruising. That's actually a 2-part series, so please look for that right after this, and you can listen to that if you are interested in river cruising. But specifically for this expedition cruise, it includes limited wine and beer with just that 1 glass at dinner with anything under the deluxe category, so below the deluxe category.
So if you do visit the bar, on our cruise, they had a great selection of local Alaskan spirits, Harbor Mountain Brewing Company. There was Port Chilkoot Distillery's 50 Fathoms Gin, and a couple other local spirits. But they did have premium spirits available, like brands that you know, like Jameson's, Tito, Bombay Sapphire, Woodford Reserve, and whatnot.
I also want to bring up a fun thing that they did, because they fished a piece of ice, a piece of the glacier out of the water, and they brought it on board. So the crew makes things extra fun. Not only was our Captain Neil, really fantastic, but also Kevin, our naturalist, was great. And the team, that wasn't the only people on the team, but those are 2 standout crew members. But the team brought this piece of ice on board, and they broke off pieces so we could have some in our cocktails. If you go to the article linked in our show notes about our experience on Alaskan Dream Cruises, you will see a blue drink that just simply seemed appropriate for the colors of Alaska. That's just what I chose to drink that day with the ice. You'll see the piece of ice in there. And then they did a kind of fun thing that they had people sign up on a sheet to guess how long it was going to take for the ice to melt. And then whoever won got a little bit of a prize that was Alaskan Dream Cruises swag. So that was really fun and a cool memory. And also, I was just thinking, it's fun that the crew is so accessible, like you said, because the onboard naturalist was able to give presentations. So that's some entertainment on board. So let's just talk in terms of entertainment for a minute and what daily life on board is like. So your food schedule, unfortunately, if you're somebody who likes to sleep in late, this is not going to be your cruise, because they make an announcement on the audio system to get up at 7:30 in the morning. So it's a little difficult to sleep in. Now, could you ignore it and go back to sleep? Sure. But then you might miss a morning full of fun things, starting with breakfast and then doing whatever excursion is included. And all the excursions are included for the most part. There were 1 or 2 that you could do a different excursion, but there was an included excursion at that time. I remember some people signed up for this bear adventure that cost a couple $100 more. But again, there was something else scheduled at that time, so we didn't do that. But there's so much to do during the day that you're going to want to be sure that you have that early breakfast and get fueled up for the morning's activities. There's also lunch and dinner, of course, and then some cookie time in between for snacks. And they also put snacks out in the lounge. So if you're noshy in between, you can have some chips or nutrition bars or what have you that are out.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the bar was usually open during the day, or else you could get a drink or soda if you needed something like that.
Yeah. And the shop was open too. Because these ships are U.S. flagged, they don't have to kind of abide by the same laws that a lot of internationally flagged ships are. So the shop, quote unquote, which is like a couple shelves in the restaurant, you could shop and you can buy drinks and whatever at all times.
So we talked about watching for wildlife, but you can also go to the bridge and speak with the officers throughout the day. And they had an open bridge policy. If you want to go up and talk to the captain or just see what's going on up there, you're more than welcome to do that. Ultimately, the entire ship was very relaxed. So access to the bridge, access to the crew, you could just have a conversation, ask the naturalist pretty much any question that you wanted to. With that being said, there wasn't even locks on the doors. That's how relaxed the entire cruise was. We've experienced this before on other expedition cruises, but this felt very much like a family also between the crew and the other passengers.
That's true. I mean, when you're only a handful of people, well, a couple of handfuls, and I don't recall our ship being at capacity. There were a few staterooms that were still open, so it wasn't even at its 49 passenger capacity. You get to know each other really fast, especially when you are experiencing these once in a lifetime memories together. And then in terms of who was on board during our cruise, I would say it was perhaps 50s, 60s, some early 70s, but maybe most people in their 60s were in our 40s, so we were on the younger side. However, it is a fantastic itinerary for teenagers and young adults, I would say, as well. So I could see multi-gen families, and I know that multi-gen families cruise with Alaskan Dream Cruises. It just so happened that on our cruise in August, maybe, people were starting school or college again, and it wasn't the time for them to be there. But it was a nice mix of adults.
I would also call out that some of the excursions are a little bit more strenuous. So just keep that in mind, that you're going to be hiking and you're going to be hiking in somewhat volatile weather. So it could be rain, it could be slippery, it could be just bad traction. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in our packing recommendations. But because you mentioned some of the hiking, let's talk about our itinerary and the Inside Passage Sojourn really quickly. It was 8 nights and 9 days from Sitka to Ketchikan. It also does the reverse sometimes. And our key destinations were starting in Sitka, and then we did a wilderness exploration and kayaking and beach landings. We also went to Glacier Bay National Park. And again, we could go further into the glacier area than a big ship ever could. We went to Juneau, and Orca Point Lodge is a highlight of Alaskan Dream Cruises because they own that area and that lodge, but we couldn't dock there that season. We were the only ones who couldn't dock there, and the reason was because of the weather. Dan and I literally were looking out the window. The rain was just hitting the window, coming down. And then we look outside, and this man that is on land at the lodge is trying to catch the rope from the crew, throwing it out to dock there. And it was just so windy. And this poor man is out there drenched in the rain, trying his best to get us there. And it was just too dangerous to dock there and make sure that the ship and all the passengers were safe. So to the crew's credit, they quickly pivoted and set up the dining room for dinner because we were supposed to have it on the beach that night, but unfortunately never got to have it. But like I say, just another reason to go back with them. But you can look forward to Orca Point Lodge. We also went to Tracy Arm Fjords and Frederick Sound. We went to Wrangell, and I recall, as you said, a hike. We did an optional hike there. So we did a tour with the native people there and saw some totem poles and some of their traditional areas as native people. We saw a really great museum they toured us through, but there was also a hike that you could do if you wanted something a little more challenging and strenuous on your own time to an amazing overview point, and we did that. We also went to Kasan, and we went into Misty Fjords. the day before we disembarked, and that was such a highlight. We were amongst all the beauty of this earth and cliffs, and it was during sunset, and it was like purples and pinks in the sky, and everybody was on the top deck enjoying the scenery, and we ended in Ketchikan. We also did a pre-cruise tour that was included, and that started in Sitka. So we started by dropping off our things at this hospitality room, and we went to the Sitka Sound Science Center and the Salmon Hatchery, also the Alaska Raptor Center and Fortress of the Bear. And we will get into those things a little bit more in one of the future episodes 2 weeks from now, talking about all the things to do in Sitka as part of this Alaska series. And then after the cruise, when we ended in Ketchikan, ferry tickets were provided to get to the airport because you need to take a little boat ride just to the other side of the water, which you can see as you board the ferry. But it was really nice that those ferry tickets were provided. And we actually didn't leave till a couple of days later, and we were able to still use those tickets. So that was nice that that was included in your cruise fare.
Okay.
Any other fun memories that come to mind? We won't deep dive into all of this and all of these destinations unless you really want to. We love hearing from our listeners. So if you are missing a deep dive on these, please write to us or send us a text, which you can do through the show notes on Buzzsprout, or you can easily find us and DM us on social media at Sometimes Sailing. But Dan, do any fun memories come up from all of these destinations?
I really liked Wrangell as a port. It was a smaller town. The hike up to the hill overlooking the town was a lot of fun. And it was actually one of the towns that we had cell service in when we docked.
Is that why you loved it?
Not necessarily, but I liked that town. And then I really enjoyed Ketchikan also.
I will say that one of the nice things about Wrangell was that the young adults, I would say they were probably in their 20s, that were giving us a tour were Native Alaskans and part of the Native communities there that had moved back from living on mainland, or the lower 48, I would say, had moved back there because they really wanted to keep the traditions alive and help people like us learn about the history of the area. So that was really special. But I'm just going to throw one more memory in Kasan. Also, a similar situation. Our tour guide there, who was amazing, was a Native American who had moved back there from Portland because he wanted to raise his children with his wife in a small community that they could say, like, hey, can you watch my kids for a couple minutes? I need to go run an errand. Or their kids could get outside and run in the woods without them being concerned that something bad was going to happen to them. And they just didn't feel as safe as they once did with children in the lower 48 again. So they decided to move back to Kasan, and he took us on this beautiful hike, very easy hike, flat land, through his land, basically the region. And it was just beautiful, these tall evergreen pine trees. And it was just so peaceful. And he showed us a lot of totem poles that were still there and told us some of the folklore. The Native people, they're not really telling you the exact stories, especially if they're not their totem poles. That's part of the respect of the culture. But he showed us them and told us about the animals on them, because they're very interpretive. Some of them, they're a little hard to make out if it's a whale or a frog sometimes, or a raven, so to speak. And that was one of my best memories. And then there was one of the houses where they all gather, and we were able to go in there and hear more stories. And he was very open and transparent and able to candidly share his thoughts on Native Americans and how they're treated in the United States. And that was another highlight for me.
Yeah, that was a good day.
Let's switch gears and talk about the packing and the hiking, like you mentioned. And let's just start with footwear. That's a great point you made.
Yeah, I brought a pair of lightweight boots. I wish I had brought something a little bit more waterproof, because there was a few days that I had some wet socks. So I would recommend bringing some waterproof boots or lightweight boots that have been treated for waterproofing.
Oh, that's a good point. Our Alaska packing list has waterproof spray on there. We're going to link that in the show notes. You could buy everything on Amazon.
The other thing I would bring is a raincoat. Waterproof pants and jackets are provided by the cruise line, but you want to bring those layers to wear underneath so you make sure you're warm. So wool clothing, warm layers. It's Alaska. It's going to be chilly.
Yeah, and those waterproof pants and jacket that are provided by Alaskan Dream Cruises are great, but they are thin, so you need to dress warmly under it, and just make sure that you indicate that you want to use that when you sign up for the cruise and they send you the pre-cruise forms, because that's how they know your size and such. So just make a little note once you sign up for that, or ask them when to be expecting that form. And I wish that I had brought slippers for the cabin, because all they wanted to do was be cozy in the cabin, and I regretted not bringing a pair of slippers. So leave the formal wear at home. It is a very casual cruise at all times of the day, but bring slippers if you are like me and you like to be comfy, cozy in your temporary bedroom on a cruise ship.
Right. One of the main activities for us was watching for wildlife. So make sure you bring your own binoculars. If you have a pair that you prefer, there are a couple that are kicking around the ship that you can borrow and use, but we brought our own just because we wanted to make sure that we had them at hand at all times.
And also because the quality of the ones on board do not live up to the quality of the ones we brought, and that makes a huge difference when you need to focus quickly on the animal that is flying by you, or you want a crisp, clear vision and better magnification. So also the binoculars that we purchased in the show description, I cannot recommend enough. We travel with them all the time on an expedition cruise.
Then if you are interested in capturing wildlife with your camera, you're definitely going to want a telephoto lens, because it may look like the animals are close, but they're not. They're quite a ways away. So at the very least, bring your binoculars, but a telephoto lens if you want to capture those memories with your camera.
And I will say, while iPhones or an Android or Google Lens phone are really great, and I think they're great for getting close on, let's say, stationary objects, you really need a fast shutter speed when you are click, 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 clicking to get that wildlife in action. So I've said it before on the podcast that I have a lens that I own and bring, but I first rented a lens to make sure that it was the lens I wanted. So you can rent a lens, which I will put in the show description of where to do that, or you could buy a lens, and I recommend doing it on Amazon because they have an easy return policy if you find that you don't like it, or you can buy it from your favorite camera store.
Let's talk about extending your trip. We did a few days prior in Sitka and then a few days after in Ketchikan. Each one of those ports has a lot to offer, so I would suggest definitely extending your stay in one or both of those places.
I think that's a great place to leave it, because our future episodes in the next 2 weeks focus on Ketchikan, and then we are going to focus on Sitka. But it's also a great place to end this, because it's just bringing it full circle of why a small ship adventure is great in Alaska, because you start and end there. Whereas a big ship, you are starting or ending most of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, in Vancouver or Seattle. And it doesn't make sense to fly to Alaska to extend your trip just to fly back to the west coast of mainland United States or the lower 48. I say lower 48 because obviously it's the mass, and Alaska is attached to the United States, but many of the places you go in Alaska are islands. So that's why I trip up on my own point. But starting and ending in Alaska on a small ship adventure allows you to extend your trip before and after. When we did that combined with this 8-night, 9-day cruise, it was like butter. It was like the best adventure we could have asked for to welcome us to Alaska. So with that said, thank you, Dan, for accompanying me on this trip down memory lane, and tell everybody listening why we so loved our small ship cruise adventure Don't forget to check the description for a link to our article with photos about our Alaska Dream Cruises itinerary. And then there's another article about the ship and what to expect, because part of small ship cruising is knowing what to expect. We don't like surprises in that regard, and you're going to want to just understand visually how the ship looks. And the shower and toilet are in one small room. We didn't even touch on that, but you'll see how the room is set up in those photos. And lastly, follow, subscribe, and share with a friend to help this amazing podcast grow. We are so grateful for you.